Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Valco VLink presentation. My name is Sean Francie. I'm the general manager at Val Products. Been with the company about 14 years, started in the Minnesota office, but now based out of the corporate HQ in Pennsylvania. So today we're talking about Valco's VLink. And VLink is Valco's link for you, between you and your buildings, to be able to monitor and manage that animal welfare and performance. And you can see there's a screenshot of it here, and we'll get a lot more in depth with that towards the end of this. It's made up of two main parts. We're going to cover the hardware first and the software second. So there's a USB stick that comes out with software to be able to load onto your PC, and then there's a VLink hardware node that will live at the farm site that will connect together all of the controllers on the site and get them out to the World Wide Web. So the node itself is this small NEMA 4X enclosure here, not very glamorous, but does a really good job and pretty robust. And it's got inside of it this core kind of little single board computer. It's a Raspberry Pi for anyone that ever does side development or plays with computer type stuff. But it's this robust little tiny board. And then it's also got this down here, green striped fellow that converts the signal coming in from all the controllers into USB and into something that the Raspberry Pi can deal with. And then it's got a universal rugged power supply and a wiring terminal strip here. So this little board is connected out to the World Wide Web, and it's constantly communicating with the controllers on the RS-485 network on the backbone that all of the controllers talk to each other on. And then it's pinging out to the World Wide Web to a website, to a web server really, that we maintain, that you would then access through the PC. So the node connects up in three different ways that you're going to attach all three of them to make it work. One is connecting with a wired connection to an Ethernet, so to your internet connection on the farm site. And that, I mean, this is a little RJ45 connector, your standard patch cable that you would normally use to go from a router to your computer. Same thing you're going to use here. Plugs right into that single board computer. And then we've got the normal sensor wire, similar to what we use for our temperature sensors. That's going to be stringing together the controllers and connecting in to the wiring strip, carrying that data back and forth between them. And then also we've got the 110 or 230 power coming to it. So we plug in from our router on the site to the bottom of the box right here with that RJ45 connector. And this will work, I mean, it's a wired internet connection. So it's not Wi-Fi, it's not wireless, it is wired, but you plug it in. And if you have cable modem, if you have through your telephone provider like a Verizon or a Comcast, if you have HughesNet or satellite, some people even have like 4G or now 5G mobile broadband type things. Whatever it is, if it's a standard thing that you could plug your laptop into with a patch cable, that's what we're going to use to get to the internet, plugging in directly to the Raspberry Pi node. We don't need anything fancy like a static IP address. We're not really doing any programming of your router or modem to be able to get out to the World Wide Web. It's really plug and play, and it's a vast improvement over some of the older ways that people have had to connect to get their barn sites out to the internet. For the communication side, stringing together the controllers so that they can actually talk to it. So a little picture of the wire up here again. So this is our standard 2-wire that we use like for the temperature sensors, generally between an 18 and a 22 gauge. It is wrapped in a foil shield, and it does have the drain wire just like the temp sensors do. And we're going to use all three of these. And so we daisy chain them together, and whether it's a Venture Plus or a Venture Pro or a Venture XT, there's this modem port. It's a little hard to see here, the flash kind of caught it here, but you can see it down here, the label for modem, and it's got a plus and a minus. So we're going to come out of the plus and minus here, and let's say we had a Venture Plus in line 2, we'd come in and we'd stick both the other controller into it and the same wires that are going to be going outbound here. So we daisy chain it one to the next to the next. And then we come to the node itself, and we've got the plus and the minus here, and these little press fit terminals. So you can actually just, this little orange square, you push on that with a tiny flat blade screwdriver, you just physically push the wire in and you let go of it, and it makes a really good solid electrical connection. So they're really easy to wire that way. The one thing that you would keep in mind is that That's about a 300-foot distance maximum that we can have from our furthest away controller to the node itself. And that's just a limitation of the protocol, the way that the controllers talk to each other. They use this RS-485, it's called, connection. And the longer and longer of a run that we do, the more that signal tends to get noisy or degrade or have options of dropping out. And so we'd really like it to be within 300 feet when you're using our standard wire. You can technically go further, up to 1,500 feet if we need to, but now you get into fancier wire that is not the stuff that we offer. It's not the stuff we typically use for our temp sensors, and it's not necessarily what most people have laying around. It's a twisted pair wire with 120 ohms impedance, and it gets a little fancy. We have the spec. We can share it in cases we need to, but we don't run into really long runs that often. Be aware it can, but what we're typically saying is 300 foot or less. One thing that you do want to do, then, just like with the temperature sensor, so basically you've got these two wires, each one of them is insulated, and then those two wires are wrapped in kind of a tinfoil wrapper that keeps outside power, impacts and static electricity and different things from getting at the signal. And then outside of that foil is this bare drain wire that's still inside the gray insulation, but it's outside of the foil and it's outside of the two wires inside. That drain wire is there to take all of that noise and run it to ground. So it's for your temp sensors and for your connectivity, linking your controllers together. That drain wire does an important role of taking all that noise that could impact your signal or affect your temperature readings and takes it to ground and out of the equation. And so the way that that works in all cases is that you don't want to wire this little drain wire up to the controller or up to the temperature sensor or up to the other controller. It's actually just left unconnected at these ends, and it's only connected at one side, which is back at the ground for the node itself, because that's going to go from there to the circuit breaker panel or fuse box to that ground bus bar and then to your grounding rods or spikes. So we want all of that noise to go one direction only, to the ground, not half of it going back into your controllers or half of it going to your temp sensors. So that's what drain wires are for. And shame on me, this picture that I'm showing you, they did not actually connect the drain wire on yet. So do as I say, not as I'm showing you. Power connections, the final thing, and it's straightforward. It's ground L1, L2, so it'll work with 110 or 240. It's 50 or 60 hertz. It's an agnostic, robust little power supply. Obviously follow electrical codes and ground it to the circuit panel earth ground. The one thing I will say, just as a little hint for you, and the reason that this is the last slide in the installation, is that this will work the best for you as a up and running if you first plug in the patch cord, then wire in all of your controllers, and then apply power. Because there is no little power switch on off inside the VLink node. As soon as you apply power to it and turn on the breaker, it turns on the computer, and the first thing that little computer does is it tries to go out to the World Wide Web and ping the mothership. And so if you haven't connected your patch cord yet, or you haven't connected your controllers yet, and you put power to it, it'll kind of error out because it won't find anything, and it might take a while to straighten itself out. It's not going to break anything, you're not going to ruin it, but little insider tip from me to you, do all of your connections first before applying power to the VLink node. Just since we're talking about wiring in all these controllers, one of the things that people will ask very frequently is, well, which controller can I use it with? Is it just for the XT? Can I use it with my Ventras? And yeah, you can. It's actually very backward compatible for the most part, so long as the controller that you have is running the right software. So the newer software versions are required to talk to and work with the VLink. In the case of the Venture Pro, there's actually two versions of the Venture Pro out there. They're both called Venture Pro, but one of them is just a newer spin of some of the hardware in the display board. And you can tell the difference really easily. The Venture Pro second edition or Series 2 has kind of this whitish bluish backlight when you look at it. The Venture Pro Series 1 had the more standard older green screen, like you see down here. So if you've got a Series 2 Venture Pro, it's going to work. It just works. If you have an XT, it's going to work with VLink. If you have the older green screen, the Venture Pro Series 1, you need to make sure you're running at least a version 2.01.06 or higher number. So if your number is lower than that, you'd want to upgrade before you could work with VLink. If you're running an old 12 channel, one of the old Venture Pluses, or even the Gain Treks for that matter, some of the older 16 and 32 channel, gain track labeled or straight Ventra, not a Ventra Plus, not a Ventra Pro, they will work as well, but you need to be running at least a 6R08 or higher. So if you're running a 4 or a 5 or something like that, it's not going to work with VLink. In the case of the Plus or the gain tracks, they've got that big chip card, and you would need a new card with the new software, and you need to transfer your parameters over and do it that way. In the case of the Pro, you can actually just get the update file emailed to you and put it onto the SD card and update it that way. So that one's pretty straightforward. Anybody that does need to upgrade software on their Ventra series controllers can send an email into tech support or talk to their dealer, who can talk to the Valco sales reps. But we provide that. It's not an upsell or anything. We're not squeezing people for money. We can offer that to you. When you do upgrade, depending on how far you're upgrading, it does require some parameter tweaks, and you might end up reprogramming some things. But almost every controller out there we can get up to snuff to be able to work with VLink. So then we're kind of all done wiring everything up. We've powered it up, but before you sit down and grab your PC, or before you leave the site, the things that you're going to want to make sure that you have, one is this little USB drive, which it's a part number separate from the hardware. This USB has the actual VLink PC software on it, so you're going to want that so you can do the install on your laptop. That laptop does need to be a Windows 10 laptop. I think most of them are these days. Some people are still running older software, but Windows 10 is what it's made for, and obviously you need an internet connection. And then before you leave the site, make sure you grab all of the controller serial numbers. So whether it's cancel 3 times and then down on the older, 2-line displays, or on the XT, you can find it here under the controller information menu. This number here is what you want to make sure you have from each controller that's wired into the VLink node. And then the other thing you want to do is the node itself, in that box on that little single board computer where you plug the patch cord into, snap a picture of it, because you're going to want this sticker right here that's got the UN, the password, which I blanked out on this one, but there's a really long number there, and taking a picture is better than writing it down, and then this node identification right here. And I'll show you this when we get into the actual software, but you're going to want these things here because you need to put them in when you're on your laptop and setting up the software in the first place, so that you have this information on the node. So the node, this DCA, FC, whatever, that's the Valco network node. It maps right over here. The UN username, this V105, whatever, that's the FTP username right here that you put in. And then obviously the password is the password. So make sure you grab all that stuff, because it's a hassle if you go back to your house or back to the shop and you start setting this up and you're like, oh, I don't have any of this information. Well, grab it before you go, serial number, and snap a picture of the node itself so that you can legibly see the username, the node ID, and the password. All right. That being said, that's kind of the hardware side of it. That's getting set up in the first place. Now what I'll do is I'll shut off this PowerPoint and open up. I've got a VLink up on my computer, and I'll share my screen and show you that. So bear with me a second here. Just jump over. There we go. All right. Actually, I've got this in dark mode. That might be a little hard to see on your screen, so let me change that over here. Just a regular style. Okay. So this is on my PC. This is what the VLink software actually looks like. So, I've got it in my start menu here. I click on it and it opens up. And it's basically creating a little database using, Access databases. And it's using that to keep track of all the stuff. So all of the controllers on your site are feeding information to that hardware node, that VLink node on your site. And that VLink node, as soon as you plug it in, it kind of goes out and it pings this one specific spot that Valco, owns and maintains on the World Wide Web, where we keep our server. And it says, hey, I'm this node, I exist, and it heartbeats up there every 5 minutes. And based on that, it then starts pushing the data up and filling out this database on this server. And your PC software now, so the VLink that you've installed off that USB stick and put onto your laptop, is now going up and finding that site and finding specifically your node, which is why we wrote down that information, and grabbing the data through your password, through your node on a secure server to get just your site and pull that stuff down. So this is where in the first time you would come in and you would put in that network node information, you'd put in the username off of that sticker and that really long password you'd put in. And so that's where you have that for. And then you can see that it also, you've got a collection interval, in this case of 5 minutes for parameters and current info records. One thing while we're here too, the VLink node and the FTP server then, so VLink has the ability to send you emails or text messages if there's anything going on at the control. So for alarms, for instance, every 5 minutes-ish, it's going to be sending up what's happening. And if there's an alarm, it can then send you a text to your phone or an email or both or multiple phones. You can put a bunch of them in here. And that's inputted at the beginning here too. And the way that that's done is that, so if it's an email, it's pretty straightforward. You stick the email in. If it's a phone number, phone numbers are actually treated as emails by your carriers on the back end for stuff like this. It's a little goofy, but so if you have T-Mobile or if you have AT&T or if you have Verizon, you would put in, whatever your phone number is, and then you'd turn it into an email address. And there's a little button over here that just helps you kind of figure that out. So if you've got AT&T, typical AT&T is just AT&T Mobility. It's your phone number at txt.att.net. So that's what you would put in at the back end of that. Or, they're pretty much all in here. If you've got Verizon, it's your number at vtext.com. So you'd stick that in, att.att. I forget what it was, comma.net. And that's how it's going to send you a text message to your phone. So that stuff goes in there, you save that, and then update your network node, and then you're ready to reach out and pull all that data off of that server from all of your controls. So in this case, this is Rick's barns. Rick is a software engineer for us and also a hog farmer in Minnesota. And he's got a Plus, a Pro, Series 2 Pro, and an XT all set up for us on this demo so that we can look through all of them. And so on the left here, and we can resize these if we want to, just by dragging and dropping, kind of like Windows does. On the left here, you see it's Enterprise 1. That's just sort of the name for it. Access Point 1, that's our node. So that's Farm 1. And if we wanted to, we could actually just rename that by right-clicking it and say, it's I don't know, forest site, if that's what it is. And then we've got the Venture Plus, Venture Pro 2, XT, and if we wanted to rename them, we could do that as well. And we could say, this is Barn 1 or North Barn or whatever. And then underneath there, we've got all the data. So basically what we have here is everything that's in the control and the ability to make changes to it and then push those changes back to the control. So this stuff you see here, this is kind of some of the stuff that you see on the first page of, in this case, it's a Venture Plus. So it's got the load sequencing delay. If you have passwords, they would be in here. Some of the stuff, this is read-only because these are set when you first set up the controller, but if it's hogs or birds, if it's imperial or metric, Fahrenheit or Celsius, this is read-only because it's showing you that, but these are changes that get made when you first install a control and come through. And then over here, you've got the little print control configuration button. That's kind of handy because that pulls up sort of everything that's in there right now. So all of your air sensors, are they on the main box? Are they an expansion box? And then what channel are they wired to? So if you're wondering, what wire is stuck here in channel 2 in this box, oh, that's air sensor 2. Usually people have a matching naming convention, but sometimes they don't. This is a handy way to see that, as well as all of your settings. So you can print this all off here. And you can see if you have a minimum vent, timers, or ramp settings set up, your alarm set up. So you can print this out, keep it with you. You can save it off as a PDF just so you have it, but that's all there. Is a pretty easy way to get that. Alarm history too is a simple place just to see at a glance when things happened. 4:19 at this time of the day. It's not active now. Zone 1 had a high-low temperature because it was 81.8 degrees. Count is 0 right now because it's not active and it's not ramping up anymore. So that's kind of here. Then we get down into the zones, and every zone, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3 will have kind of its own little subset here, but if we go to the zone devices, I'm actually going to jump down to XT. I think that has a little more in it. If we look in the zone devices, you can see our set point average and effective working temperature, outside temp, if we have an outside temp sensor, today's age for the animal and calculated weight. If it's currently in natural or tunnel, humidity, if we have it, static pressure, if we have it, heat index. Feed sensors, you can see the last 24 hours, 2 days, 3 days of runtime, water usage, same thing. Over here, we can actually see what's running. In this case, we got pit fan 1, 3, sidewall fans are running. These ones are in red, and they actually say that they're switched off for sidewall fan 5, 7, and pit fan 2. So that's kind of handy. And then you can see the actual for all of the sensors right now. Air sensors 1 through 3. We've got an ammonia sensor in there, carbon dioxide, monoxide, humidity, and outside temp. So that's all there kind of at a glance, along with the bright buttons here. And then you can see this one, because this is just an instance that I loaded for this demo version, but this was last collected yesterday around 3, 4 in the afternoon. I could hit collect again, otherwise it's going to just push up every 5 minutes from the cloud. And this is the serial number, which when we were setting up the devices in the first place, I had to put that in so that it knew which one to talk to, or more correctly, which one to listen to. Down to the zone settings. This again gives you the printing the configurations. It also lets you look at things like, do I have any minimum vent or purge settings set up? Like, do I have a ramp set up? If I want to look at what the ramp looks like, I can kind of see graphically when it's on off time basis versus days. That's kind of a nice little tool when you're visualizing how you're laying out your minimum vent for like a wean to finish barn. Likewise, temperature control settings. Here's my temperature ramp. I got the same thing here. I can graph it out if I want to, and it kind of pulls up, you know, from age 1, age 14, and it just kind of interpolates what everything's going to be that way. And I can make all the changes just like I could standing in front of the control, basically, to this here, and anything that I change here, then you'll see the save button pops up. Oops, I didn't really want to make that change. I can also hit original. It takes me back there without saving. It's kind of my undo button right there if I mess something up. I can close out of that. Alarm settings. Everything can go on here if I want to turn that one on. If I want to not turn that one on. And likewise, when we get down into like our fans, our inlets, miscellaneous devices, sensors, all of these are just so that you can see how they're currently set up. You can make changes if you want to. You could also look at, you know, in the case pit fan 2, I think was off, but let's say pit fan 1. We could look at how it's run over the last, you know, let's take a week here. Doesn't really have a lot of runtime. Actually, it has a lot of runtime. Sorry, it's been on the whole time, except it was off for the last hour yesterday. If I wanted to add in anything else. So these are the calculated times. We can also, because the XTs and the Venture series keeps track of actual runtime, which is based on, you know, if the switches are overriding it or something. It'll keep track of that too. Then you get down to your sensors. Same thing, the sensors are nice because you can look at graphing those out as well. So if I wanted to look, let's just say for the past couple of days, here I've got sensor 1, 2, 3 and the outside temp sensor showing me basically here's hourly over the past couple of days. And then if I left click on this and drag and drop any of this stuff, it'll zoom in for me to that level. So I can zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. I can zoom back out. If I'm zoomed in and I want to move around, I can just grab the right mouse and kind of pull myself forward and backwards. So it's a nice way to look into that stuff. You can also take all this stuff and just export it. So I can click here and I can say, all right, well, I actually want to just put it all out as an Excel file. And then what it'll do is it'll take all that data from those dates I selected between my starting and ending date and dump it out in here for me. So I can see 69 degrees, 70 degrees, 44, all right in there. And there's things you can do, little changes you can make as far as what data you want in it and how you're going to dump it out. Or if I want to take off a sensor, I can do that. So in a nutshell, that's really what we're doing in VLink. So it gives you that ability to come and make these changes, and then it will push those changes out. It only really lets you push those changes in the first place if you also have your cell phone put into it or an email put into it, because you want, if you're remotely making a change, you certainly want to get an alarm back if something's going wrong or if it fails out. So it doesn't even let you make changes until you have that safety stop put in. But yeah, really is a good little system that gives you the ability to export the data, review the data, change things. If you have an alarm come up from your auto dialer and you want to get into the house and look into it remotely, you can. And it wires up pretty easily, and there's not a lot of hassle or headache or IT involvement to be able to make it connect to the outside world and get that data remotely. So with that, I'm gonna stop sharing. And I'm going to turn it over to Kayla, because I was not privy if any questions came in or not, but if any questions come in, we'll kind of beat those around a little bit and go from there.
All right, Sean, we have a couple questions for you to answer. We have, can I change parameter sets through VLink?
Okay, so settings changes within a parameter set, yes. Changing an entire parameter set, like going from hot nursery to cold nursery, or spring to winter, no, that requires you to be in the barn in front of the control and doing that hard changeover. That's a pretty big change and nothing that we wanted to have to do remotely, so no.
All right, next question. Does this replace my Agri-Alert alarm system? How does SMS work for alarms?
Okay. No, it shouldn't. No, it should not replace your alarm system. Everybody asks that. Alarm systems are really useful, and it's really useful to have your alarm system be separate from your control system. Because if the control system goes down, you won't get the alarm, but that's exactly what you want an alarm on. Yeah, no, it's really not meant to replace your alarm system. It shouldn't replace your alarm system. And then the SMS, which is just the fancy way of saying text messaging. How that works is that really every 5 minutes, the node is kind of requesting all of the alarm records from the controller. And so if there's a new alarm, when that 5 minutes comes up, it's going to grab that and say, okay, I've got text messages enabled, I've got a phone number to send it to or emails to send it to, and it's going to send them. And it's going to send one text for every alarm. So if you have multiple alarms, you're going to get multiple texts. And then after it sends it, it's kind of done until 24 hours have gone through. And then if that alarm hasn't been cleared and it's been 24 hours, you'll get another text message. But for somebody who's thinking, I'll just not use an Agri-Alert anymore, I won't use my farm alarm anymore, you get one alarm, and then if you forget about it or you miss the fact that 2 text messages came instead of 1, you're not going to get a reminder for 24 hours. That's not really what you want for a solid alarming backup plan. You really want to have thermostats in the barn that are changed every week, or at least checked every week, and you want to have a separate, independent alarm system.
All right, next question. Can I update the software on my Venture Pro through VLink?
Oh, like moving from a 6.1 to a 6.2 or something. No, that falls into the same category as a parameter set, only exponentially even bigger of a step. No, that's something that we really want somebody in the barn for safety's sake, especially because sometimes when you change software, it requires you to reset or adjust parameter settings that you already had. And so you could move up your software and all of a sudden you don't have any, you would have to re-input some timer settings, or you'd have to re-input feeder settings or lighting settings. It's the sort of thing it's important enough you should be there to do that. So no.
Next question, does this work with Ventiums?
Man, I feel like I'm striking that guy. I'm really being negative, but no is the answer to that one. Ask me some questions I can say yes for and I'll feel better. But the Ventium, I mean, that's a circa 1994 product. Great workhorse. We're still seeing some in the fields today, but that thing is just no, it's a little too old. We cannot upgrade that thing to work with VLink. It is apples and oranges.
All right, let's shoot for the next one then. Can I still use my communication station for VLink?
Oh, yeah. So yeah, the old communication station, which was like a phone modem slash RS 232 to 485 converter. We had those out at a lot of sites, again, with Ventiums and with the first Ventras and Ventra Pluses and things. That's a half yes. That's like a yes and a no answer. You can use it right now as a direct connection. You cannot use the phone modem with VLink. Phone modems are also sadly antiquated and hard to support. So if you were currently using like the old LINK, not VLink, but LINK software from 10, 15 years ago, and dialing in through, you know, a phone modem to your site, you will not have that same functionality. If you had an office with the computer in it and the computer was directly connected to that communication station and that communication station was directly connected to controllers, yes, VLink will work with that. For now, probably the next one or two steps down the road of VLink software upgrades, because, you know, we're always working on things and tinkering with things, but it's getting harder and harder to be backwards compatible. So yes, for now, not in the future. No, that communication station is it's going away. The VLink node is really the next thing.
All right, sounds good. We only have a couple left. How many controls can I tie into one VLink?
Oh, like into one node. You're going to be limited mostly by the distance, because there's really not I mean, if you were up around 30 or 40 or something, what happens is that basically you start timing out. So if you want to collect everything every 4 or 5 minutes, well, it takes about 20 or 30 seconds to collect a single controller's worth of information. I mean, it depends a little bit on how involved the barn is, or if that one controller is running like 9 farrowing rooms or something, and they all have inlets. It takes a little longer. So, you know, if you get more than, you know, 10 or 15 controls, you might start to time out if you're on that 5-minute cycle. You can expand that cycle. You can make it longer. You can say, I only want to look at the data every 20 minutes to allow you to collect more and more and more. But then eventually, you know, depending on how many barns you have, you're going to just hit that 300-foot limit. So there really is no limit, but realize that it takes about half a minute to collect a control's worth of information. Can
I use VLink on my iPhone or Android device?
No is the short answer. Not yet is the realistic answer, because that is something we're actively working on, is developing the apps for that. You know, up and down day by day, depending on whether the fires and projects we have going, but that is being worked on regularly. And yes, in the sense that technically you could use like a TeamViewer program on your phone or a remote VNC to get into your laptop that's running VLink. So there's a hack to get around it, but no, we don't have an app today, although it is being worked on. Thanks everybody for attending, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Sean.